scary accident for Joaquin Phoenix could have been even worse if not for the timely arrival of a famous guardian angel. And that's far from the only time that he's had to face the darker side of life. It's probably safe to assume that people who name their children River, Rain, Joaquin, Liberty, and Summer have a unique outlook on life. The spiritual journey of John Lee and Arlen Bottom brought them and their first two children to join a burgeoning religious movement known as the Children of God. The family was living in one of the Children of God communes in Puerto Rico when they welcomed their third child, Joaquin. However, John Lee and Arlen decided that they needed to leave the group when they learned about a controversial practice called flirty fishing. That refers to when a cult enlists its female members to seduce and sleep with men outside of the group to entice them to join. The Bottoms didn't want their daughters used that way, so they escaped when Joaquin was 3 years old. Children of God's founder, David Berg, was later accused of sexual misconduct and child sexual abuse, including by his own daughters and granddaughters. However, he died in 1994 before he was ever formally charged with any crimes. As the Bottom clan was fleeing from Children of God, Arlen was pregnant with her daughter Summer. Alas, they had to leave everything behind at the commune, and they didn't have any money to get back to the United States from Venezuela, where they'd been living at that time. So they ended up finding a cargo ship that allowed them to ride for free as stowaways. As it happened, the ship was transporting Tonka trucks, and the crew gave one to young Joaquin as a gift for his 3rd birthday, which happened during the journey. They also made him a cake, which Joaquin remembers as being the first real cake he'd ever eaten. While the kind crew did their best to make Joaquin's birthday special, the circumstances were hardly ideal for such a young child. To make things worse, the siblings had to witness the crew catching fish and killing them in extremely brutal fashion, which led to Joaquin's decision to become a lifelong vegan.
And it was just absolutely obvious that that was something that we didn't want to participate in and we didn't want to support.
In a 2012 interview with Time magazine, Joaquin Phoenix described his family's situation after leaving Children of God by admitting, "We were straight up dirt poor, we had nothing." Before hopping aboard the cargo ship, the Bottoms struggled under crushing poverty. At one point, they were living in a rat-infested slum, and at another, they had to cram together in a single room of someone else's house. Eventually, they arrived in Florida, where they started a new life. To commemorate the milestone, they changed their last name to Phoenix. River and Rain had exhibited a knack for performing when they sang and danced on the street to promote Children of God, so the family decided to cultivate that talent by relocating to Los Angeles. The Phoenix kids then busked on the streets for money, and eventually Joaquin began to book acting gigs. His earliest screen credit is a 1982 episode of the musical TV series 7 Brides for 7 Brothers when he was 8 years old. At the time, he was going by his self-appointed new name of Leaf Phoenix. By 1991, he began using Joaquin again.
I feel that their opportunities are just amazing, the things that they've gotten to do and have gotten confidence.
Arlen Phoenix, who now goes by Heart Phoenix, has remained a prominent fixture in her children's lives, though her husband wasn't as keen on living in the public eye. There are almost no publicly available photographs of John Lee Bottom other than a handful that were taken when all of his children were still young. While Joaquin and his siblings have publicly spoken about their upbringing and their mother, they usually only mention their father briefly within the context of longer stories, but seldom in any greater detail. On the whole, very little is publicly known about John Lee Bottom. A notable exception is in the Gavin Edwards book Last Night at the Viper Room, River Phoenix and the Hollywood He Left Behind. Among the revelations made by the book are that John had issues with drinking, so much so that it was a source of ongoing tension between him and River. If this is indeed true, it would go a long way towards explaining the apparent estrangement between John and his children, not to mention River's addiction issues and Joaquin's own eventual struggles with alcoholism. Early in his career, Joaquin probably wasn't the most famous Phoenix sibling, although he's long since established a steady career that stands on its own. But it's still impossible to tell the full arc of his life and career without mentioning his older brother River, specifically his death at the age of 23 from a drug overdose. It happened outside the infamous Los Angeles nightclub The Viper Room. Unsurprisingly, this tragedy had a profound impact on the loved ones he left behind, especially Joaquin. Joaquin and Rain Phoenix were with their brother the night that he died and had to witness the entire sad scene firsthand. Red Hot Chili Peppers bassist Flea was also there that night, and he accompanied River to the hospital, where attempts to revive him failed. He He was declared dead at 1:51 a.m. in the early morning hours of October 31st, 1993. Joaquin's harrowing 911 call from that night was then played repeatedly by the media for years afterwards, forcing Joaquin to have to relive that horrible experience over and over again. Reporters often demonstrated little tact when asking Joaquin about his brother's death, to the point that he not only quit acting, but public life in general. He eventually returned, of course, though the memory remains a sore subject. Despite his unsettled childhood and the tragic loss of his brother, there isn't much evidence to suggest that Joaquin Phoenix indulged in anything particularly excessive during the early days of his career. If he did have any vices, he didn't really let them affect him in any way that was obvious to the public. But it wasn't so easy all the time, as evidenced by his time starring in the 2005 Johnny Cash biopic Walk the Line.
You just become him, and you forget that you're an actor playing Johnny Cash.
Phoenix has never publicly gone into detail about what led him to become such a heavy partier during this time. Did he disappear a little too much into playing Cash, who spent many years struggling with his own addictions? Did it hit a little too close to home that Cash also lost a brother under tragic circumstances? Regardless of the reasons, Phoenix knew that he had only himself to blame, as he admitted to GQ in 2020. I wasn't engaging with the world or myself in the way I wanted to. I was being an idiot, running around drinking, trying to screw people, going to stupid clubs. By all accounts, Joaquin Phoenix wasn't drinking or under the influence of any illicit substances in January 2006 when he flipped his car near Los Angeles' Sunset Strip. It seems that the accident was the result of his brakes failing, which caused him to collide with another driver. Furthermore, Phoenix wasn't cited by law enforcement, and he and the other driver exchanged information and resolved things themselves without getting any courts involved. While neither driver suffered any serious injuries, Phoenix still came uncomfortably close to losing his life that day. According to Phoenix, he found himself surprisingly calm despite being in an overturned car after a collision. He was so calm, in fact, that he was about to light a cigarette as he waited for help to arrive, not realizing that gasoline was leaking from his vehicle and that the flame could have caused an explosion. Luckily, none other than German filmmaker Werner Herzog was passing by at this moment. He warned Phoenix not to light up, effectively saving his life.
I said to him, "Man, relax." And he said, upside down, he said to me, "I am relaxed."
Though drugs and alcohol weren't a factor in the crash, the experience still forced Phoenix to reevaluate his life, and he voluntarily checked himself into rehab shortly thereafter. Despite what was happening in his personal life at the time, Walk the Line proved to be a high point for Joaquin Phoenix professionally. He received widespread acclaim for his portrayal of the country star, including Best Actor nominations from the Oscars and several other awards bodies. Another actor who was having a similarly huge year was Heath Ledger, who was enjoying the biggest praise of his career up to that point for Brokeback Mountain. Phoenix and Ledger kept bumping into each other at all the ceremonies during that awards season. Neither of them won a ton of trophies, as they mostly kept losing to Philip Seymour Hoffman for his titular turn in the biopic Capote, but they nevertheless ended up becoming close friends. Unfortunately, that friendship would prove to be short-lived, as Ledger died at the age of 28 from an accidental prescription drug overdose in January 2008. Ledger went on to posthumously win an Oscar for his turn as the Joker in The Dark Knight. A little over a decade later, Phoenix would play his own version of Batman's longtime adversary in 2019's Joker. And in a nice bit of symmetry, Phoenix won an Oscar for the role as well. He also won a Screen Actors Guild Award, and during his acceptance speech, he praised Ledger's portrayal of the character and called him his favorite actor. One of the strangest periods of Joaquin Phoenix's career happened while he was promoting the 2010 mockumentary I'm Still Here. He was mostly joking around during the promotional tour, but nobody really knew that at the time. Instead, it seemed like he had lost his mind when he went on talk shows in a full beard and claimed that he was quitting acting to become a rapper.
And Joaquin, I'm sorry you couldn't be here tonight.
He's funny.
It all turned out to be a publicity stunt that was concocted by Phoenix and Casey Affleck, who directed and co-wrote the movie. I'm Still Here ended up being a box office bomb that failed to impress critics or audiences. Even worse were the sexual misconduct accusations from two women who worked on the film against Affleck and other members of the crew in Affleck's presence. The claims were ultimately settled out of court. Affleck denied being directly involved in any misconduct, as he chose only to admit that there was rampant misbehavior on the set that he should have done more to curb as the director. Phoenix, for his part, wasn't accused of any abuse. He and Affleck were actually brothers-in-law at the time, as Affleck was married to Summer Phoenix. Furthermore, the two had been close friends for 20 years, first meeting in 1995 while working on the movie To Die For. Affleck and Summer Phoenix divorced in 2017, and according to Joaquin, he and Affleck haven't spoken in years. Most attempts to do any sort of internet research about Joaquin Phoenix's father, John Lee Bottom, led to conjecture and various claims that don't cite any reputable sources. And when Joaquin and his sisters have mentioned their father in interviews, it generally only has to do with their early lives when they were still small children. But one crucial piece of information has since emerged. During a 2019 interview with Vanity Fair, Phoenix was asked where his dad was living, to which he responded, "He lives in heaven." The revelation was so shocking, and Phoenix's delivery of the news was so flatly matter-of-fact that the Vanity Fair reporter didn't immediately register what Phoenix was saying. After some back and forth that involved Phoenix having a little dark fun, he finally confirmed that his father had in fact passed away from cancer in 2015. As it turned out, John Lee Bottom had been living such a private life, and his children and his family had discussed him so infrequently, that the wider public had no idea that he had died until his son mentioned it in this interview. If you or anyone you know needs help with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP-4357.